Rightio. Now, as I do, this is the quickest video note ever, mainly because to just keep my show on the road when I've been battery airing, it's been we've had 170% of annual rainfall in the last year. Now, I haven't got time to sit down and write this out. I would much prefer to write this out longhand, but I'm going to do it into this. So, mainly because I've had a bug, a flu, so I gotta use the sunshine and get the show back on the road, dry everything out. I had a bit of a spillage of water inside, and what else? Yeah, to hurry up because I got to go for a walk. You've got to keep your walking rate going, whatever, and it's been pretty atrocious weather. Right, so for 15 years I've monitored the public conversation. BBC, more thoughtful people, even the good writers. The best one in Britain is Rachel Cusk, without a doubt. She's the only one mature enough to have some kind of circumspection about herself in society. Now, I want to improve and I use words like memoirs almost as a parody. I can't stand that word. It's just sharing your stories. I read a great book. I can't remember who it was by. I think it was by Mr. Four Quartets. Yes, it was just 600 paragraphs, standalone. I must find it. I read it about 30 years ago. Just 600, 2 or 3 paragraph sections just relating personal things in his life. And it's great. I learned so much from that. Not in this modern mode of life coaching, Eckhart Tolling, or these ridiculous... They are narcissistic preachers. Anyway, 15 years I've monitored the public conversation. If I hear Rachel Cusk is doing an interview, I'll listen to her. I've even been to see 1 or 2 people speak. I went to the Cheltenham Literary Festival 3 or 4 years ago. Anyway, now, I will state, blast out things like, oh, we have an absurd culture of enforced speaking about feelings and things like empathy. Teachers, waddling blue hairs, have been tyrannising people actually for 15 years or more with a certain kind of you've got to think like this. Of course, you must learn empathy. You can't learn empathy, you have to live empathy. And this conversation, or rather the way of... it's well intentioned, but it's totally wrong. It has failed. It is too much... There's too much focused in on a sensitivity that we can't actually be. You have to... Anyway, waffle. Right. I know that nobody can mean what they say and say what they mean. I just know that. And I'm going to give a really good example. Because my own writings, jottings, this, that and the other rings, I've got to pad up. If I go for a long walk, the following morning, my mind will be, there was that story there, that story there. Now, here's a really good example. I forget this one, but almost exactly 20 years ago, I did the last thing in my life, I know, because I still think about it. I have a conscience about this. I did the last bad thing in my life that I've done in my life. I haven't done anything as bad as what I'm going to say for 20 years, and I know because I have a conscience. And it was certainly when I learned, because it hurt me what I did. I learned, just for God's sake, never imply a course of events, or a fellowship or a friendship or anything unless you mean it. And this is how I really learned that. So this is the story. This is in me, and this is what empathy is, and all of these dreadful phrases like self-care and all of these things, and being in touch with your inner fucking whatever voodoo fuck. But of course it is also anodyne. That's the worst insult you can give to anything. It is censorious in a subtle way, and that's bad for you, gives you creases in your face, and it doesn't work. But this is what empathy is, and self-care, which is the most absurd phrase ever, is being aware that this bad thing happened, and I nevertheless have learned from it never to do it again in any conceivable way. Now, I am actually the luckiest person in the universe, because for this bad act, I had the best excuse ever. In other words, it's an absolute. It does not forgive me for what I did. Now, I repeat, this to me is the thing that I think about. God, that is the terrible thing that I did. Right. So, just so briefly, February 2004, I hadn't seen my whole life for 15 years prior to that point in my life, had only been about children. Now, there'd been 3 or 4 years where I didn't have one under my roof, but that was me. Made me happy. I was good at it miraculously. And everybody knows this. Oh, there'll be a few who've tried to imply otherwise, probably even brainwashed my daughter. Well, I have so much video of her, you can't make it up. You can't, the camera doesn't lie. And as a person, I call myself an intellectual, but once every couple of years I did it last night. I watched the film. I was so tired from this flu. I watched Notting Hill. It's a wonderful film. You can learn more in that than if you literally spent 10 years actually with Eckhart Tolle. You can actually learn more about real life. Anyway, to keep to the point. Right, so January, my life had only been about my daughter. Full stop. That's the only thing. Nothing else in any way. Anything else secondary. Love, or even sex, or anything. All secondary. My daughter was removed wrongly. It wouldn't have happened virtually anywhere else. It was just a chance set of circumstances. Blah, blah, blah. I lost her late May 2023. Now, it took me ages to get out of the issue, and I couldn't ever get any legal help. It was just a joke. It was a stitch-up, without a doubt. But I don't actually even mind, because I'm the luckiest person in the world because of 2 aspects of what happened here. First of all, I did a terrible thing. To me, it's terrible. And by my set of values I've had for 40 years, I did a terrible thing. And B, because of certain attentions, not because of any clever legal shenanigans, I got her back in a way that's more concrete than anybody else ever in the court system. Now, so what did I do? Right, to so quickly explain it. So when we eventually got to the ordinary custody court, the judge actually said, it's the one word I hate, he said, "Oh, I've got my celebrity couple here." He was wonderful racing. The mother, of course, the mother and her controlling psychopath partner hated that. Anyway, forgetting that, even with celebrity status, it still took about 3 months to properly get into court. And this is the bit that matters. So I actually was given access, not paid for, but the BBC actually sought out who's the best lawyer we can get for him. When I was still on remand trying to deal with this matter, and everybody's saying, what on earth's going on here? So the BBC sourced me the apparently best lawyer, family lawyer, you have to have a lawyer from your local, within 50 miles because of the legal aid rules. And I couldn't afford a non-legal aid lawyer. So, but nevertheless, this was probably one of the top 5 lawyers in the county called Wales. I tried somebody else out, a disaster, and then I spent time with this absolutely most beautiful man, Gerard. Doesn't matter. I won't even put his surname in. Who, after we'd started to go to court, and he was a lovely man, but he admitted himself he really wasn't that good, and he was the most senior that could be found. And even he started to say to me, "Look, listen, it's probably you do a better job yourself." Now this was the time in Britain when it was becoming just changing, and it was understood all lawyers are useless, which they are. If you can't get a job in criminal or civil suing, you end up in the family law world, which is tragic because it's the largest area of law in Britain. Anyway, so there I am. Can't get to see my kid. They could have done something human, but no. I'm dependent on a lawyer. I didn't know how to do it myself. And at least I have a lovely man who admits he's not that brilliant. He used to shake when he stood up in court. It was all too much for him. And he gradually advises me, well, look, it's becoming a bit more normal now to be litigant in person. Oh, Christ, Gerard, that's beyond me, you know. You should think about it, or rather, if you think about it, I won't take it personally, Simon. Anyway, so over a few weeks, I started to research this, and being the celebrity of the family whatever world, I getting in touch with the neutral women trustees on their board. In fact, I think they're kind of run by women these days. Families need fathers. Yep, celebrity. Okay, we'll put you in touch with our top man who does something called Mackenzie Friending. And I'd had him recommended by a few other sources. Now, I didn't even know what this was. It was hinted he charges £100 a day. Fuck me, I can't afford that. It's like, oh, I could just about afford it. Anyway, so after a few weeks, I get a call from Ian Mackay. Hello, here you've been inquiring after me, and so we had this chat, half an hour, and it's like, I didn't really know the full rules, but the rules are you've actually got to officially sack your lawyer, and then you go in as litigant in person, and you have something called a Mackenzie friend coming along, holding your hand, and there's various levels you can speak. So this is a completely informal system, but Ian was recommended as like one of the best in Britain. There weren't many of them. There's only about 20 then, if that, only 10 really, because I actually did speak to quite a few others as well. Anyway, everybody said Ian's the man. So I'm speaking with Ian on the phone. I still remember the conversation. I was in a field in Wales, and I was freaked. I hadn't seen my daughter for 9 months, and I knew two things. First of all, no one sees their kid, basically ever, if they haven't seen him for 9 months. Even if they're the goodie in the equation. The courts would generally take the position, well, yes, but this is the new established norm, and it's going to be too traumatic on the child to reintroduce the child to you. Now, that was the situation then. It has changed. I mean, because that's a Nazi, Stalinist, fucking Maoist, evil approach. Basically, they're too lazy to do anything to help. And it's also totally contradicts many official kind of approaches and other things. The official approach to adoption is do it sharp and swiftly, get it over with quickly. A kid will get used to anything. And yet, when it comes to reintroducing a kid to their own parent, no, we can't really do this. Anyway, forgetting the detail. So, and the second thing I knew, well, I technically had what was called a Schedule 2 offence, which I didn't, you close your ears to this kind of thing. But I've never been, it's like, I don't think even then with that you could be put on this thing called the Sex Offenders Register. But it's like, you've committed technically an act against a minor. And, which is absurd in many ways, but that's the technicalities of it. And the way the system works is, even if a judge or a social worker or a probation officer knows the reality, the kid lived with you. You had been abroad many times, which was the situation. You were basically the main parent. Nope, you've got a schedule to offence, and that's all they see when they turn on their computer. So not only have I, anyway, broken this 6 month situation of being reintroduced or just getting my kid back, according to the system, I also got a schedule to offence. And anyway, no bloke got their kid back. No parent got their kid back. None of these things ever used to be changed. No bloke ever won, and plenty of women as well were in a similar situation to mine, would never see their kid. No, all of them would never see their kid again. So that meant my heart was broken. My head had the worst thing imaginable going on, which is why I'm lucky, because there should never be any excuse for any of the behaviour that I'm about to relate. But that was the reality. That was my day in and day out reality over 6 months. So I'm speaking with Ian. It's like, yeah, I kind of understand the rules. Well, listen, yeah. And so he explains to me he's a busy man. He might be able to find me a day because he lived right the other side of the country. If he came to spend a day with me, because you can never do these things remotely, and came to a court with me to hold my hand, it's going to be 2 days blocked out of his life. Big deal, busy. He's known as very good. So I'm like, oh, well, I've got to go to court in 10 days. Listen, I'll use you. Yeah, just let me get back to you just to confirm when I've got rid of the lawyer. Now, that was me saying the wrong things, because in my heart and head, I had no idea what to do. I'd had that conversation quite a few, at least 3 or 4 times over the last previous month, and I felt terrible. Now, I didn't call him, and then probably I didn't answer my phone for a few days, and I kind of chickened out, and I went to court again with the lawyer. At which point, I think for some reason or other, I can't remember how it went, Gerard was even nicer and even more, well, you told me you've spoken to Ian, man, even I've heard of him, he's got quite a good reputation. Why don't you give it a go? Anyway, Simon, you could do it. You come to court with me now, you're reasonably confident. So, the most terrible thing, I did pick up the phone. Ian, hi, listen, I'm sorry I didn't call you. I probably made up some excuse. But listen, I think I want to have a go at this. Now, here's the point. So, he felt, well, first of all, of course, I hadn't had any manners. Secondly, I'd implied I would be using him, so his schedule had been messed around a bit, although later on I discovered he would have been encountering this all the time in people like me who are going through the worst hell ever. I did it myself. I did Mackenzie friending myself, starting a few years later. But there was no anger, but he was miffed. Well, okay, I'm not terribly impressed. He wouldn't have even been that unkind. He would have used kindly language, But okay, well, I'll let this one pass. Right, when's your next court? In a week? Okay. Is this a guaranteed firm booking? Ian, yes, I swear this is a guaranteed firm booking. Now, I couldn't explain to him the terrible... I'd been a zombie. Been a mental hurting zombie. Just so happens, when I met him, he came up. I met the most beautiful man, the only beautiful man I've ever met for 30 years. Beautiful. Funny. Just turns out he wasn't actually that good at the law. He was a bloody shambles. He was a mess. He even read the Daily Mail. And as we drove to court, and Simon, I got to stop and get my Daily Mail unless you take me to a garage to get my Daily Mail. Ian, that's a fascist magazine, newspaper. I'm certainly not going to let that newspaper in my car, and I really shouldn't even be letting somebody in my vehicle who reads it. Laughter. But, as stated, the most beautiful man. And it turns out that although the judges actually did respect his vibration. It was pure honour and funny and intelligent and wit. He really wasn't that good at the law. He could never find his precedents. They were such a mess. He carried a great big briefcase around with hundreds of legal precedents, which you kind of need sometimes, and they were all such a mess. His car was filled with chaotic paperwork to the roof. It's like, Jesus Christ. But no, and here's the point. I learnt empathy, not that moment, I learnt empathy for myself to a small extent, but much more important, a year or two later, and I got my daughter back. Not because of Ian, really. It was probably, they knew the truth anyway, but the fact that I had Ian, no, it was because of Ian. Because Ian came with me and the judge thought, this guy really means fucking business. He's got this astonishing man with him. Ian was about 63. Ian died a year later, the great tragedy. And Ian adopted my child as his favourite. Not favourite's the wrong word. He just hit it off with my daughter so much. My daughter adored him. He adored my daughter. He'd come a day early. He couldn't always come to my court things. I had to do half of it myself. And he was no good on the law anyway. But he would come a day earlier, often just to spend time with my daughter. He was a beautiful, the most sincere, magnificent Daily Mail reading cunt of a human being I'd ever met. And when he died, we went to his funeral. We were very honoured to be invited to his funeral. But I learned empathy. What is empathy? Empathy is by looking at my own. To me, that was a terrible thing. I mucked around a guy. It was minorly compared to what most people do, but still, that was against my rules. I'd mucked around a guy who was busy helping other people, and it was just bad manners, etc., etc. And when I met people a year or two later who were also in such a mess, I had empathy for them, because I know that even I had been, although my luck is it was the most absolute, perfect excuse, exoneration in reality. But that's what empathy is. You're learning empathy by a life experience where you have actually... I was horrified with myself. I was actually terrified of Ian coming to the house. It's like, I've been so bad-mannered to this guy. I never actually said anything unpleasant or raised my voice or anything. It's like, I've been so bad-mannered. I let the guy down, What's he going to think of me when he comes to my house? Well, my daughter is waiting for him to meet him, and we've got dinner made for him because he's had a 6-hour drive. And I went through that whole process of shame with myself. Because of that, and it was real, I still can feel it now. Because it was real, when other people have done that, if they've been similarly in a mess, or even in half the mess, or impossible. I was in an impossible situation. It's a miracle. I'm the only person ever that has turned around those circumstances so quickly to literally get my daughter back a few weeks later, full time, or half time, which is what she'd been before, despite the most fierce opposition in the world ever. No? But I'm also lucky in that I committed my bad act. And so when I say about everybody else, when I do a constructive critique, it's not coming from you. It's coming from, look, I did that once. Actually, it was minor. I know that. And I've got every excuse in the world, but I wouldn't tell them that. Look, it is the most pernicious thing. When we're implying to people we're on the same side, or we care, or we're polite even. I was a zombie. I was incapable of being polite, caring, or having any rational thoughts. My zombiness was just, my life is over. How on earth do I do this impossible fight to get the only thing that has been good in my life and I care about? And for her, it's the best thing too. I knew it was the best thing for my daughter. How do I get that back to where it was 9 or 10 months ago? against impossible. Everybody told me it was impossible. Most of them didn't quite have the guts to say it to me quite so straight, but everybody, all the experts I implied, well, this could be a, that's what empathy is. And that's what self-care is. Self-care is, I went through that terrible situation that to me was terrible, also because I let somebody down. I broke the rule. Mean what you say, what you mean what you say, or just imply by your body language or by your smile. I broke it. And I felt terrible about it. But I realized, even me who was so absurdly together, we end up in situations where we just can't function. Now, if everybody else I speak with also reaches that point, just with a small engagement with me, or it'll be with other people too, of course I have empathy. I mean, it's tragic though that it seems to be that just on the smallest little confusion or little obsession with their selves, their happiness, the right person they want to spend time with, or even have a fucking cup of coffee with, they are so stuck. Now, I was stuck. I was in that zombie place for several months after I was first told about Ian, and maybe 6 weeks later it actually arrived at the point that Ian's sitting at our dinner table. So like, is this for certain now? I've driven all this way, I've met your lovely daughter, and I'm quite impressed. You've cooked this from scratch. So am I definitely your man? Ian, you knew the moment you walked through the door, because it's happened with other people. We love you already, okay? And you even brought a present for my daughter who you never even met, and she loves it. And it's the most thoughtful present ever. A little something or other to do with archaeology. Ian, you realise by now I'm the real thing. Otherwise I wouldn't even be fighting this case. I'm being serious. You are it. I felt immediately. Okay? So, let's battle the fuckers. But that I'm the lucky one. But I'm also lucky because I badly behaved, and I realised, well, I have the perfect excuse, so of course I don't think it probably caused me to lose some of my hair. I just wish everybody else I meet would have a clearer picture of where that line is in life, for their own sake. But in terms of environmentalism, as I've written on my other site, etc., it has been the number one killer. It has destroyed environmentalism. Endless people with, seemingly they perform that they are into something, and then they kind of just self-destruct. There you go. So it was meant to be 3 minutes, and it's taken 15 minutes. But that is the most important story. No, it's not. But that's one of... I've got about 50. Let's call them... They're word pictures of just... I don't even want to call them stories. It's just like things to share that are actually real. Because one thing I've discovered in life, I'm not sure if anybody can do it anymore. You've got to tell your actual real stories. They're the things that people perhaps remember, help them and benefit them, and also that means they believe you too. Well, I have no go areas, and I couldn't give a shit. And certainly, the moment this silly word oversharing came along, it just shows. Good. Montaigne shared. He was the first. He did it in pamphlets. I always say Montaigne was essentially the first blogger. I mean, his version of the blog was the pamphlets. He shared plenty of stuff that people hadn't before. We respect Montaigne, and hopefully it can do just getting into the habit of sharing intelligently for the benefit of others too. That's the whole point. It's like, I don't have any. I haven't shared this as I have some kind of conscience that needs to be assuaged. Better out than in. No, I have total empathy for myself. I understand that hurtful thing I did to somebody else actually was more hurtful to myself to piss him around. Learning from it and simply sharing that as a kind of, hey, this is what empathy really is. Because one of the terrible things, well, no, it's a huge thing, is the language of the so-called guider. Well, they call them, I don't know what they call them. Well, they call themselves all sorts of things, from life coach to broadcaster to writer, or just, those involved in personal growth. Their language, or care, or medicine, their language has gone so perverse, or education, even more important, or psychology, right? Their education, their language has gone so perverse the last 15 years. And most people know this, except they don't know how. I, as it happens, do. I've monitored it. I kind of care about it, because I had some background, you could say, in sort of very deliberately guiding social policy in respect of children. So I'm not frightened of it. I'm not frightened to listen and critique. But the language, the lexicon, the way, the tone has all gone so perverse, and it doesn't work. Preaching to young people that they know empathy because they had a fucking lesson on it from some fat blue hair, that does them more harm than good. Because I probably have been in situations like this myself. They think, well, there's something wrong with me because I don't get this empathy thing, really. I mean, we do have a society where many young people have become more violent. They don't have empathy. So it does more harm to them than good. Falsely shoveling, you now know empathy because you went to you had my loving, smiley Empathy 101 session. Yeah. That's the first time and only time. Actually, I'd had a few experiences a few months on remand where I also learnt, but it's even a more brutal version of empathy. But that's what empathy is. You have to live it. You have to live it. You have to have genuine, real feelings that affect you, even if you don't share them with anybody. That's how you learn what this curious thing, ideal thing called empathy is. There we go.